Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Data Ideas podcast. This is Dustin, and pleased to be joined for today's show by Kedeisha Bryan. Welcome, Kedeisha.
Thank you, Dustin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So glad we were able to do this. Wondering if we could kick it off by you just kind of walking through your career journey so far and your experience in the data analytics and data engineering fields.
Absolutely. So, I pretty much got started, or my interest in analytics specifically got sparked, I would say, probably about 2 years ago. I was in school and I was unsure about career options for my degree. I was studying industrial engineering technology and I just wasn't really interested in like production and things like that. So, a professor mentioned that when she graduated school, she actually did data analytics for Delta, and that sparked my interest. I googled it, went on Reddit. It seemed pretty cool, so I started self-teaching myself SQL, Tableau, some Excel, Power BI that summer. Ended up getting a what ended up being a year-long analytics full-time internship at Cox Communications. I got started getting involved in the data community, privately data communities. I wasn't posting at the time, and then ended up building my network behind the scenes, and that network helped me get my next position was a data science internship at Hulu, working under Mark Freeman, the Mark Freeman, pretty much everyone knows on LinkedIn. That's where I got really exposed to the data engineering side. That being a startup, the data was not as clean and
Sure, right.
ready to go like
Yeah,
a large company like Cox Communications. So, um, really learning how to see how learning the importance of like data infrastructure and things like that. And so that really harpened my like end to end kind of exposure to analytics and the data process as a whole, and just also learning how to like advocate for your own work, advocate for like who you are, because sometimes you can be working very hard, but no one really knows that you're working very hard, unfortunately, and you can just get passed up on things. So I learned a lot about that, really how to advocate for your work in an organization. And then afterwards, I was interviewing late last year and ended up getting a position at Booz, which I got also through networking. Ended up graduating, and since then I've just been at Booz ever since.
very cool. So there's a couple things that stand out there that I'd like to ask a little bit more about. So you mentioned when you were first getting started, you did some self teaching, and after you did that, it was a segue to an internship that you landed. Can you talk a little bit about the self teaching process and what your approach was to that? Because so many folks ask me, you know, okay, I see some skills I should learn. How should I get started? And I often will explain that, much of my, knowledge base in the field came through self-learning. Um, I'm curious how you did that. And then as a follow-up to that, I'm curious, how did how were you able to leverage what you self-taught into getting an internship?
So, one thing, I've never coded before. When I first got into learn SQL, that was the first time I've coded anything, even though it's not really like a programming language.
Right.
That was the first time I've ever done any of that
Sure.
stuff. So, um, it was also new. I mainly first was like, okay, where can I learn all this stuff? And it was like Data Camp, Data Quest, Code Academy. And I would go through like the curriculum or whatever, but certain things I ended up maybe like my interest was not really held that much. There's always like certain parts of the platforms I just didn't really like.
Sure.
Um and so I delved into just going on YouTube, to be honest with you. And then after I learned like the fundamentals, I would just like follow on projects, because one thing I said, I was like, okay, I see, you know, SQL, on its own here, but what does this look like in a project? What does
Yeah.
this Tableau look like in a project? So
Right.
Following along projects on YouTube was very helpful. Like doing like actual projects was very helpful because that's where you can actually see how these things are applied. Um, and so when I was starting to put things together and started actually doing my own projects, that actually gave me the confidence that I took in interviews when I did interview for when I started interviewing for the like fall internships for the analytics internships. So I just carried that confidence that I had through the projects that I did, even though I've never worked in an analytics space, never worked in an analytics um, job before. But I was going up against, kids who were actually studying this stuff in school. So,
Sure.
it wasn't like a simple type of thing. But leveraging your projects and using that as confidence, even though you've never like done this in like a professional sense. That's pretty much what I did.
Very cool. Uh, and you mentioned self advocacy too. So once you got into an internship or other positions, you said you realize, that, hey, you really have to highlight the work that you're doing. There's a lot of folks, and I see this all the time. I totally agree with you. There's folks that are doing great work, but they might do that great work for years and years, and it really never gets recognized, perhaps maybe beyond their peer or immediate manager level. And if they would have just done a few simple things, maybe hard initially for them to do it, but a few simple things to advocate for themselves, they might have found themselves in a very different place career wise. Just my, you know, theory from what I've seen around me over the years in the field. What does self advocacy look like to you? And I mentioned a little bit from my perspective why I think it's important, but from your perspective, why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think it's so important because I came from the thought that if I keep my head down and work hard, people will notice. I'm just going to get everything, and that's just not the case. Especially when we're talking about with jobs, everyone's dealing with people at the sense. So there's always going to be some sort of subjectivity there,
Yep. Hmm.
and relationships matter, unfortunately, and people just being visibility really matters. It matters a lot more than I think people think about or even really care to think about. I always feel like people should always be thinking about career advancement. Where do you see yourself? You don't even have to think about 10 years, 5 years. Where do you see yourself next year, 2 years from now? Because job hopping is so, popular now. But where would you like to see yourself? You don't want to stay in the same place, especially in tech where, if you don't keep up with the advancements, you can find yourself out of a job, unfortunately. So, um, you should always be thinking about um, making sure that your team and your organization knows what you're doing. Because whenever opportunities need to be or opportunities spring up, your name or your face is like thought of when that happens. So anytime, and it could be small. Like for example, when I was at Cox, we would always have like some sort of like team meetings, organizational meetings, any sort of opportunity where they're asking people to present something or whatever. You should take that opportunity to do that, even if you're an introvert. I'm an introvert. um, Take those opportunities to present yourself, present something, put yourself out there, and just be visible. And it could be small, it could be large, but make sure you're doing those things. But yeah, it's if you're just if you think, because I've been in that space where I feel like I was working harder than everybody, but this person who I feel like is less talented ended up getting a position that I felt like I was supposed to get.
Hmm.
And that other person who got the position was a lot more
Mm,
sociable, a lot more visible,
mm,
and would just make those little efforts to, um, you know, network really,
mhm,
be visible. So it's sad, and the thing is, you can either be if you find yourself bitter about that stuff, just work on being more visible. To be honest with you, because being bitter just doesn't help anyone, but doesn't really help. So self advocacy is so important, and
mhm.
being able to tell your story very well is so important. I think a lot of people don't know how to do that also. Like it's very easy to undersell yourself. Very easy to undersell yourself. So always know how to tell your story and to highlight your abilities and always be visible. That's what I would say.
I like that, and I think it can be hard for folks to perhaps make their work more visible than it needs to be because they have this perception sometimes that it's bragging or that it's not the right thing to do. But I really believe that organizations hire experts, you know, like analytics professionals to come in and do work that they don't know how to do. And part of that is showcasing the art of what's possible and putting that in front of, decision makers. And oftentimes when that happens, guess what? You get asked, hey, would you be willing to do this or that? Or gosh, the fact that this person can do this, I wonder if they could do this other thing, and I think it's the reason why folks are brought into the roles that they're brought into, so it's not a bad thing to advocate for what you're doing or show people what you're capable of. I think that oftentimes that results in a win-win for both the individual and the organization, but it can be hard, especially in the beginning, to think in those terms.
I agree. And when you're in an analytics position, in my opinion, you're in such a great position to learn so much about a business process that other, even the decision makers are overlooking, to be honest with you.
Right,
They're
exactly.
not they're not spending that amount of time in the numbers like you will be doing. So you can come in, may not know much about something, study the numbers, study the analytics, find the areas of improvement, and really present something where, hey, these are just highlighting the areas that no one was really paying attention to, and then automatically that boosts up your credibility, your trust. It's really a good. I mean, it's really a good position, to be honest with you. You can really utilize analytics and your job as showing up as like a subject matter expert in something.
Hmm.
Um, and if people embrace that more, I think it'd be a little easier. But you really have to embrace that type of opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And I just as an example, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile earlier. We were talking a little bit about this before the recording, but I think so. First of all, I would recommend that anyone listening that wants some really great examples on how to quantify the work that you've done as an analyst, how to present that. I mean, you have it presented to an external audience on LinkedIn, but you could position, the results of your work in the very same way that you have here internally as well. Um, but I just point to an example of, when I look at the data visualization analyst co-op position you had at Cox Communications, you mentioned something that jumped right off the page at me. You automated key business reports utilizing Python scripts, reducing report owners' time to 15 minutes compared to the previous 4 hours per week. So 3.75 hour savings per week. So take that 3.75 hours times 52, multiply that by the wage, or whatever. I mean, okay, there's one bullet point that you have that you directly save the organization from an efficiency standpoint. And that's just one of the things that you did. But the way that you lay it out here, I think to, a senior person organization that maybe doesn't know as much about analytics, this sounds a lot more appealing to someone like that than saying, you wrote Python scripts, right? Go
Yeah,
ahead. You're gonna say something. Yeah.
I agree, and it also kind of harkens back to the star format where the result is the I don't know if you want to say like the most important part. It's one thing that, at least for me, when I would interview, I would say the S, T, and A, and if I forgot the R, they would remind me, or they try to, if they
Sure.
wouldn't be so like
Yeah.
direct, they try to like bring that out. So what exactly was the result? So um, it's something that I had to be taught how to do. But it really talks about your impact, your individual impact on an organization. Just writing Python scripts or just building data pipelines. That doesn't show impact, but showing those quantifying numbers, that shows the impact that your Python scripts did, and that's what people want to see.
absolutely. And I think too, just as encouragement to someone that may be, reluctant to share something like that, I think it benefits not only yourself, but also potentially other peers of yours that are doing the same work, or, future peers, if positions aren't created yet, but gosh, they would be if the organization understood the benefit that folks with, skill sets that could produce results like this, the value that they would have in bringing them on, so I think that the promotion and advocacy of the work that you're doing and the value that it brings helps not only you as an individual, not only the organization, but also those around you and potentially new folks that could be hired too. So just something that I always encourage folks to think about. You mentioned in the beginning too that you hadn't been posting when you first started, some of your self teaching. I assume you mean posting on LinkedIn or social media. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Cool. And what kind of an impact did starting to do that have on your career so far?
It expanded my network, to be honest with you. Before then, I was building my network already behind the scenes. Even kind of using LinkedIn too. I would just like message people, just not posting, but posting expands your network so easily. And my network, I don't mean followers. The amount of followers you have does not equal your network.
Right. Yeah.
When I think about network, I'm talking about people who you can reach out to, or if you say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job," they probably message you with something like very like a personal message and say, "Hey, I have a lead for you." But people that you can actually reach out to, so that's like your real network. And the great thing about posting is that you allow people to come to you, right? Everyone, whenever you apply to a position, you're everyone's like trying to chase after things. But when you post and it's visibility too. You're making yourself visible to the professional community. Um, you allow people to see you and see who you are, and you will have networking, opportunities, and all sorts of people come to you um, with newfound opportunities for you. So that's really what LinkedIn has done. It's expanded my network. I've gained friends from it. I've gained a lot from it. A lot that I would not have gained, or it would have taken me a lot longer to get had I not been posting on LinkedIn.
Very cool. I'm curious, what are some of the opportunities that have opened up, that maybe have surprised you a little bit from posting? Because I know, so if I go back a couple years myself, I was also not posting, but I was doing a heck of a lot of work in the industry, but I just decided one day, gosh, I think if I started sharing some of this, it might be beneficial to some. And then, it kind of opened up this um, world that I never knew existed. I know we were on a panel, together at I believe it was the Loki data conference a few months ago. And, getting invited personally to stuff like that is just like this total honor that I never expected, and it came as a result of just kind of putting myself out there like you were talking about. So I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the things that have come up that maybe surprised you a little bit?
I would say, well, as far as surprising,
Yeah.
hmm,
Or just really cool, It's like, wow, this is really a result of doing this.
uh, I would say like the LinkedIn Learning course building. I'm not sure I would have uh, gotten that had I not have like any sort of reach. Because I mean that's kind of like the name of the game nowadays. I would say probably um, I did have a teaching assistant opportunity that I did get through LinkedIn. I
Cool.
actually got a message from that. Um, I did what do you call sponsored posts? Those, things that you
Awesome.
did not really intend
Yeah.
to, those are not the things my intention
Right.
to do or intention to get. Those are the ones that are super surprising. And honestly, like who I um work with now for data in motion. I have a small team that I work with to really help build what we're building. I wouldn't have gotten it had I not, because I'm a part of a group called Veterans Data Science and Machine Learning. Would not have gotten it. I found it through LinkedIn. I would not have gotten it through, would not have met so many people had I not joined that group. Um, so so yeah, it's different, different types of people, different types of sponsored posts, types of opportunities. It's also where the type of opportunities you get. You learn to not accept everything. So
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm curious that you mentioned the teaching assistant position. Was this at Correlation One?
yes, it's that correlation one, and I also had another one at Podium.
Okay. Cool. What's it like kind of being a teaching assistant for data? Is this a data skills program, or can you talk a little bit about what the program looked like?
Yeah, so at Correlation One, they it was a data analytics boot camp for Amazon frontline employees. So, the folks who are, doing the in the warehouse, pretty much a data analytics boot camp, teaching them
Hmm.
Excel. We teach them some SQL, teach them some SQL, and just really learn how to give them those data analytics skills. So it was a very rewarding. It was long. It was definitely, it was hard at some certain times, but it was really cool to see people really go from like A to Z,
Yeah.
not really using Excel, never really making a dashboard, to making like these full blown projects where it's
Wow.
like, hey, pick a project, pick a data set, and they actually do something and present something pretty well. So it was very rewarding to just like pass on anything that I had to like someone behind me to help them get to the next level. That's something that I really love to see. I think that's like an internal part of me. I just love to see. I just love helping people level up to where they want to go.
Very cool. And you mentioned a little bit about Data in Motion, this organization that I believe you co-founded. Is that correct?
Yeah. Um, it was uh, it was initially supposed to just be a podcast, but it's just blossomed into something else. Prior, I was involved in data communities before. I was pretty active in data communities before, and I ended up designing something where if I made a data community, what would it look like? Or made a Discord, what would it look like? And now it's expanded into something where now we're trying to build like a whole community based learning platform, something that I just had not seen yet in the ed tech space, or on learning platforms. Um, so yeah, it's built and blossomed into something super huge, and I'm very excited to see where it goes from here.
And what do you mean by a community-based platform? What does that look like?
So so the idea, what I envision, I wanted to provide a resource that's basically the in between of a cheap $12 Udemy course or just following along uh, YouTube University, and a highly expensive boot camp,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So when you're on YouTube, when you are taking a Udemy course, there's really no sort of mentoring. There's no community, right? There's
Sure.
not really learning together. You're learning by yourself in a
Yep.
vacuum.
Hmm.
Um, but when you go to like a expensive boot camp, you can get some sort of, some may have some sort of community. Usually the cohort that you're in, probably, and then you will get, mentoring. Hopefully it's good mentoring, but after it's over, and you don't have any of that, so you're kind of
Hmm.
back to self-learning full time. So the idea is to have um, live learning events, live learning events in SQL, live learning events in Python. Let's do a, end-to-end project together. Let's build a dashboard together. Let's go through a case study together, and have people, allow for people to ask questions, and do it with you. So that's my idea. It's learning together. It's providing learning materials, providing a curriculum. It's providing, really great projects, and also learning together. So it's something where we're going to have, we're going to be doing a book club, personal development club, because I feel like you should develop your whole self, not just your technical skills, but personal development club, and also invite industry experts to come talk to the community as well. So it's just learning and upskilling together as a group, as a community as a whole, not just in a vacuum by yourself.
That sounds like an amazing experience. So, I mean, I can relate to. I've taken, I mentioned I started out, kind of informally training, myself and some of the data skills I acquired. But then, over time, I started to do some more formal stuff, participated in person training, and do some of the online courses. But you're right with the online courses. You take the course and you're done, and you don't always have that community support. So, I really like this concept. How can folks get involved with the community that you're organizing?
Perfect. So right now, people can join our free Discord. Discord's pretty good. We have a lot of great resources. It's pretty active right now. Eventually, the community that I'm talking about, we're hoping to launch in August to September, and then there you people will be able to sign up on our website. So that should be hopefully next few months.
Very cool. Awesome. Is the website up right now?
Yes.
Okay.
It yes.
And how we'll put the link in the show notes as well, but what is it?
It is d-i-motion.com.
Cool. Awesome. We'll be sure to put the link in the show notes. That's awesome. It sounds like this is going to provide some really unique and enriching experiences for folks that are looking to get into the field. So I love it. I think it's a great concept, and I think that community support is very, very needed. The like online courses can only take things so far. You have to have that mentorship and sense of community, and that just I think when folks have that, it changes the energy level, especially if they have a good group of encouraging folks around them. So I really like what you're doing. I think that's awesome, and just thanks for doing this for our field.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So one question I had was on you mentioned this ed tech field. It's just grown so rapidly in the last few years. What do you think the reasoning is behind that? Is it pandemic? Is it change in how people are working and they're more comfortable, learning from home? Or is it that, the traditional education models have just become outdated? Or what's your take on that?
I'd say it's a combination of all the above. It's definitely people are just banking on the increased not only the increased need of data analytics skills, but just the increased interest in data analytics skills, and the fact that everyone isn't really in a position to go back to school, go
Right.
back to you know a program, and we're thing is that you know uh, the a lot of the I haven't checked the numbers, but if I a lot of these masters in analytics, data science degrees, I'm pretty sure if I ran through the numbers, a lot has came about in the past like 10 years, and you can't really it's hard to really say that a lot of them are proven to be effective or really good. Not all. Some of them are effective, some are more effective than others. I would say there's probably a good variability in terms of how great a course or how great a program is. So and they're expensive. So not everyone's really in that position to shell out the dollars for that, or even shell out the dollars for expensive boot camps that even cost about the same. And one thing about school is that and I'm a proponent for formal education, but the thing about school is that not only is it expensive, one can argue that if a program is not updated as quickly as technology is changing, then that's a downside. But when you have a boot camp, or you have any some sort of boot camp, all right, or any some sort of like comprehensive course, the course creator can update pretty much more easily. So you can have a much more updated, up to date curriculum there.
Hmm.
And so there's definitely it's one of those things where there's a need, there's a demand, and I think people are, at least teachers are seeing that, you know, there's improvements that they can do, so let me provide it, um, on my own platform or whatever it is. But it's all the above what you said. It's interesting because unfortunately, and it's not always a great thing because um, it, it's it's almost like some people see it like a cash cow, unfortunately, and provide
Sure.
less than stellar stuff. I made a post the other day of how much money I've wasted on courses and like, and that number, to be honest with you, is probably a a uh I was it's probably not as much as I really spent. Um, but yeah, you can use really great marketing, and the course may not be that great. And one thing that, and unfortunately, if people are like brand new, like they just learned about analytics yesterday, they saw like a YouTube video and say, "Oh wow, I want to learn about this." They
Mhm.
may not know the right questions to ask. They may not know, how to really spot a really great program, and they can just be caught up in like the marketing, unfortunately.
Yes, that does happen for sure. Uh, we've talked a lot about, kind of the student side of things and what it looks like to learn these skills and plug into a community of others that can help you perhaps enter or advance in the field. What is your perspective on, if there's someone that's been in the field and has thought about doing some teaching or thought about mentoring, what is the path to, doing something like that look like for them? You've kind of been on both sides of it, right? You've been a learner as well as now an educator and mentor, and now, you've created your own organization around teaching and mentoring. What's your perspective on that for someone that's looking to kind of get into to teaching or mentoring?
That's a good question. Let's see. There's definitely, so if you want to, I mean, there's definitely organizations. So if you want to be like a teaching assistant at Correlation One, they do have like part-time roles. They have like full-blown teaching, instructor roles. So you can start off with organizations like that, or you can start off with, you know, going to like a boot camp or applying to be an instructor at a boot camp. You can, I would say, I mean, just shameless promotion. We're always, Data Motion is always looking for people to work with
Oh, very cool.
provide that type of
Hmm.
mentorship. We actually start our career services in terms of providing mentorship, though we're probably looking to provide that for our members in the
Sure.
future. But we're always looking for, I would look first at any sort of mentoring program, mentoring organizations to really provide that, because I have found in my time that there are tons of people who love providing the stuff and will
Hmm.
do it for free,
Hmm.
but they may not, they don't want to, they don't have the time to like stand up their own platform or their own LLC, thing. So
Right.
I would look for programs, boot camps, or organizations that provide that mentoring and apply to those things. Um, and go from there. You can also, yeah. So I would start there, or even also just joining like private data communities, because there's a lot of opportunities to provide mentorship in there if you're tech savvy, I would say.
Very cool. I like that advice, and I'm wondering. I'm One thing we didn't touch on was the fact that you've done data analytics and data engineering.
Oh.
Um, yeah, does the path to learning, kind of one or the other, does it look different? Is there anything that folks should be thinking about if they're considering one path versus the other and learning those skills? What's your take on that? You come at this from a really unique perspective.
Um, yeah, it's interesting because I've spoken to folks who had roles where they kind of did everything.
Hmm.
Um, but if you just really want to be like a strict data engineer versus like a strict like data analyst, data scientist, it's very different. The tech
Hmm.
stacks are very different.
Hmm.
If you want to be in engineering, you really want to be into data infrastructure, um, really learning about data infrastructure, data pipelines. If you want to be on the front end of side or front end of the data side, um, dealing with visualizations, stakeholders, making like dashboards or and also dealing with like math and statistics and things like that. So I think it really depends on like your preference. To be honest with you, I wouldn't go by sometimes you need to like stay away from like some certain things on social media. I wouldn't go by pay, to be honest with you, either. I don't think either job, if you really hate it, would suit you at all. But it's very different tech stacks,
Sure.
very different if you want to do like strict on either end.
And for those that might be interested in one or the other, both is Data in Motion, the community that you're building, is this a place that um, both of those, folks, the data analyst or the data engineer, can come and have a community around them?
Yeah, so I would say that we're definitely building out a lot of our content right now is definitely going to be a lot of like on the analytics side for front
Sure.
end side.
Sure.
Though we have Python challenges, we have coding challenges, we have SQL challenges. So if you are a data engineer, eventually we will be building out like full blown like data engineering type projects eventually. um, but if you are a data engineer or you'd like to be in that space and you want to work on, say, like your SQL and your Python, absolutely, we have a place for you because we already do that, and we will definitely be providing content and learning opportunities on those two skills.
Awesome. And so, one question that I ask everyone that's been on the podcast is, so from an analytics standpoint, you've worked on several projects. So I think I'm really curious to hear what your answer is to this one. But what's one of your favorite use cases for modern analytics right now?
So I'll go back to so like my favorite project that I ever did.
Yeah, or it could
So
be just a project, something, or that someone else did, just something that you really like, you think is really cool.
so you know, one thing about analytics is, there's always like a lot of things that you hear all the time, but people always say that you're building dashboard and things like that for decision makers.
Hmm.
And what does that look like in real life? So when I was at Cox, I actually had a project where my analytics turned into a whole policy change in the company, and so that has been my favorite project thus far, to be honest with you, because and a lot of projects I had at Cox because I saw specifically how my analytics, starting from
Hmm.
doing a dashboard, doing a simple analysis, how it actually got utilized in the company, or how it actually translated into people actually taking this and actually making actual decisions. Because I
Right.
know sometimes it's like, and this is also to harpen back onto like advocating for your work and things like that. If you make a
Hmm.
dashboard, whatever project or deliverable you do, whoever the stakeholder is or whoever's using it, definitely contact them afterwards to
Hmm.
see how they're using it, how it's made their workflow better. I learned
Hmm.
this also from Mark Freeman, and that'll also help you with quantifying your results on your resume and
Hmm.
things like that. Um, you want to be able to call them up or conversate with them to see, hey, how are you using this? Uh, is it useful or not? But that project I had at Cox, where my analysis turned into a whole policy change, was my favorite because I literally did an analysis. I created a slide deck, presented it to leadership, and convinced them for a policy change, and that's been my favorite so far.
That's very cool. And I would definitely encourage anyone listening to go take a look at. I mean, if you're interested in even if you're not interested in getting the field, but you're interested in what analytics can do and what benefit and ROI it can provide, I would say go take a look at your LinkedIn profile, look at how you've laid out and quantified the value that you added through your data skills at your experience at Cox Communications. I mean, you've done this with others, but this is a really good example that someone could go to first and understand kind of very plainly and directly, the quantifiable benefit that the organization got out of the work that you did. So I would encourage anyone that's just passively interested in analytics and what the capabilities are to take a look at that experience on your profile. But if you're looking to kind of sell your experience that you've had maybe in an early career stage role or internship or whatever, I would also encourage you to take a look at how Kedeisha has laid this out. Because when I looked at this, how you laid this out and the one page or document that you attached to this experience, I'm thinking like, gosh, like if I'm a hiring manager, I mean, this stands out. This rises to the top immediately. I mean, it was just so clear to me the benefit that you provided, and that the benefit, I'm sure, was well beyond whatever you were paid for this position to the organization, right? So that's a very compelling case to get that next job, because the next organization is going to say, you know what, I bet she could do this here and then some, and I'll pay her even more to do it here, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I agree, and that I would say that section is probably the best out of all of them, because that's where I was able to actually see all the projects through, where I knew what my impact was. And so, if going back to it, if you guys, if anyone is listening and you made reports or whatever, you're not really sure what the outcome was, contact whoever is a stakeholder and ask them how they're using it and how it's improved their work flow, so you can document that on your own and be able to express that on your resume. You don't have to lie. I know some people like probably lie on the number. You don't have to necessarily lie on the numbers, because people will ask you about that experience. So you don't want
Right.
to, lie about that stuff. So definitely just contact whoever's using your product to see how how it's been effective for them.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's great advice. Very cool. So, what's the best way that folks can follow you and all the work that you do? We talked about the website for Data in Motion already, but what are some things that they can do to learn more from you? Because I think you're a really great person to learn from.
Thank you. So I do have a newsletter called the Data and Mentorship Newsletter. I need to be a lot more consistent with that. I do have that. I do have an email list as well, and mostly through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is definitely something where you can definitely be up to date on everything that I'm doing. And I'm always in my Discord, so if anyone wants to join the Data Motion Discord and talk to me there, I talk to anyone. So that's actually the best way. I'm telling you, some people will DM me, but I'm always in my Discord. So if you actually talk to me in my Discord, that's really the best way to like actually introduce yourself and like talk to me.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we will include links to everything we've discussed in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again for taking time to share your perspective and expertise with everyone that's listening. I think regardless of whether it's, someone that's maybe on the business side or non-technical side of things, or if you're looking to get into the field, regardless of where you're at, I think take a look at Kedeisha's LinkedIn profile, learn from how she's positioned things, how she's quantified the value that she's brought with analytics and data engineering. I just think you're a really great person to learn from. So I thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks, Dustin. Glad we finally got this going. So
Yeah,
thanks.
for sure. All right. Very cool. Well, thanks very much. And everyone that's listening, we'll see you back in a couple weeks for another episode. Thank you very much, Kedeisha.